Hello, my friends. It's time for the pastor's chat. I hope you had a good night of rest. I know that sleep is in short supply among many, many people in our culture. Sleep is not an easy commodity, so that's why I start out the day hoping you had a good night's sleep. Yesterday, which was Wednesday, in the Bible study on the Psalms, there was just a poignant little notion that the rhythm of our life and faith is to figure out how to be aware that in life there are opposing things that come at us, conflicts and problems and things, and to take our eyes off of that and to turn our mind to the reminders that God loves us and cares about us and is with us. The psalmist talks about lifting your eyes up off of the problem, which the longer you stare at it, it gets bigger instead of smaller. And then instead, lifting your eyes to God. And what happens to the psalmist is, when he does that, he falls asleep. And then wakes from his sleep, ready to go. So, there you go. There's my my thought for the day and my hope about maybe the strength for which you might have begun this day, and that hope that too much of your optimism hasn't been dwindled away yet by this time in the afternoon. So, we're still in the season of Epiphany. Time is always relative, in our minds. It's relative to how we experience it. Days, while measured into hours, can be long or short. Months can be long and short. And there are times it seems like forever ago that it was Christmas. And then there are times when I'm reminded it really wasn't that long ago. We still have, I'm waiting for people in the gathering on Sundays to point out that they can see behind the pulpit the Christmas tree is still up. It's an artificial tree, so no worry about it catching fire. But I've kept it up through the season of Epiphany just to remind us this is a season, and it's a season for we have these white lights which kind of symbolize a bright idea, right? All that. I don't know if it means anything, but that's why the Christmas tree, the Epiphany tree, is still there. And so today, I was prodded into thinking about something that I've thought a lot about over my lifetime. Partly because of my own history and the makeup, the psychological, emotional makeup of the culture of the family I grew up in. What I want to talk about today is that one of the insights that's worth gaining once, twice, and every time is that we must be aware that as human beings, our passions can overrun our reason. Our passions can overrun our reason. I don't know about you, but I am a very intuitive person. What that ultimately means when I say that is that I give the way I feel a lot of credence in my life. And I don't apologize about it. I am a person of strong feelings. Anybody who knows me knows that. And I give my feelings a lot of credence. I've also spent a lot of time disciplining my mind in logic and reason and wanting very much for those two things to be companions in my life. But for this day, in the season of Epiphany, I became aware again, this is one of those lessons that comes back around, is that we as human beings have a tendency to, instead of seeing facts, which we talked about yesterday, that change in science, Instead of seeing facts and then developing the way we feel about things from the facts, we sometimes, in fact, a lot of times as human beings, across the board, as human beings, we tend to have feelings which then help us selectively to pick the facts that support those feelings. Now, is that an epiphany? Not in the sense that it's something new, like we've been talking about. Oh no, this is something old, something really old. In fact, my own life has been a kind of coming together of two disciplines in relationship to that. I grew up for a big part of my young life, I was part of a tradition of Christianity, which is the charismatic church, the Pentecostal church. And in the Pentecostal church, feeling is king. Feeling is king. You know that God is present when you feel passion. You feel the passion of God. You feel emotion. The gatherings for the congregation were just a watershed of emotion. All kinds of, and it didn't need to make sense. That wasn't the point. And the idea of the Spirit of God was equated almost, simultaneously. It's just equated with feelings. Now, the reason that's interesting to me is that the other part of my background, my grandparents on both sides were Methodist and Presbyterians, and the history of the Methodists and the Presbyterians was that it isn't that they were dispassionate. They wrote beautiful hymns, they could be stirred for all kinds of feelings, but feelings could not lead. So feelings were mistrusted. They were mistrusted especially in debate and in trying to discern God's will. Feelings represented lack of structure. They represented impulsiveness, which never could represent God. So you see what's blended in me. I have the rigidity of the Presbyterian church in history, which is suspicious of anybody showing a lot of emotion, including the preacher. The preachers were schooled to be very reasonable and rational in their presentation. Their sermons, they felt more like classroom lectures. And then on the other side, even in my formal training through some of the American Baptist Church, it was the exact opposite. If you didn't get in the pulpit and emote, if you didn't have the passion behind what you were saying, no one wanted to listen to you. So, what's the aha for today? And it relates to the question I usually ask right up front. Sorry, I can't get my throat cleared again today. The question for Epiphany is, so what's ruling your life today? What's giving way to which? Is because there is a kind of a contest that goes on in that. How I feel is really important to me and to you. So when I ask you, how are you doing? I am asking you, how are you feeling? But also, the word that I choose is, how are you doing? How are you doing part might open the door for, some thought about. Sometimes you're afraid when there's nothing there to be afraid of, and sometimes you're feeling very angry when it's just a passing emotion. So how are you doing? So how are you feeling and how are you doing? And the question for, I think, our epiphany, our aha moment today is, do you have some sort of a monitor? What's running your life today? I still stand, I think, mostly with throwing the weight of my own life behind the reason that to me, it's a better way to live to allow the facts and the reasonableness of a situation to then guide my feelings. Feelings are passion, but you don't have to have your reasonableness be dispassionate either. I'm sort of talking myself in circles, but it's because it's integrated when it's best. When it's the life, the full and abundant life, it's integrated. When life is dangerous is when one or the other is divorced from them. We are both rational creatures and passionate creatures. And I think we are created as we go through life to have those integrated. I said before, many chats ago, H.L. Tomlinson, the quote from the 14th century, said that we see things as we are, not as they are. And that's been the quest for philosophers and epistemology, which is the science and the study or the structure of how we know we know. And then towards the tail end of my philosophy degree, we were introduced to a character in American philosophy called Michael Polanyi. And Michael Polanyi believes that every fact, every single fact, is altered by our personal will. That we actually shape what we see. And by we shaping it means that that's where our passionate side, our personal commitment side comes in. Jesus talked about people who see only what they want to see. It's that passion and that emotion that redirects our understanding. Presbyterians, by and large, in their way, distrusted emotion. They distrusted passion. They thought it was always from the dark side. Unfortunately, reason without passion, without emotion, is a myth, because all of our reason, even our most studied structure of the facts, is affected by how we feel. Which leads us then to what I think is the number one requirement for a life in the journey with God, which is humility. Humility, that's kind of what I was talking about yesterday and talking about why I love science. Because to be a real scientist, you're off the path if you're so arrogant about your discovery that you think you're right. And that you think you've moved beyond a hypothesis. Some days, as you listen into this chat, you get a full view of Pastor Lou, the philosopher, and Pastor Lou, the person who studies what human beings are like. There's a school of theology, which is process theology, that says that in order to have a good understanding of God and to have a good understanding of the Bible, you have to have a working model of your understanding of human beings. If you have no sense of how human beings work and what motivates us to be what we are, to do what we do, think the way we think, you don't have a clue. You don't have a chance, really, of putting together any really consistent or foundational ideas about God. So, a good theology requires a good human psychology. And so that's kind of what's woven in together today. Oh, wow, I must have eaten a really hearty breakfast earlier today, because my mind is full of this thought that we bring our passions in first sometimes, and then reason goes out the door. And I say it because, it happens in my own life, but it's also happening in a broad way, I think, in our culture today. And we're not better for it. We're not. So, here's my plea in this Thursday of the Epiphany season, well into Epiphany, a plea for giving rationality, thought, its day ahead of our emotions and our passion. They both have a role. One without the other is dead. So when someone asks you today, how are you doing? I would hope you'll be able to say, I'm being fairly reasonable today. Or maybe you'll say, I'm being very passionate today. I'm just following my emotions. And some understanding that it's important to do a kind of inventory of that will help. It will help tremendously into the abundant life that Jesus guides us in. So that's it for today, my friends. I hope that you're able to figure out a way to get a vaccine if you don't have one yet. I'm still hunting for mine. Some of the members of my family have gotten access, and I'm happy for them. But and if things get together for this coming Sunday's gathering, we're going to have another version of our own virtual choir singing Dona Nobis Pacem, which, Lord, grant us peace. And anyway, I hope you'll have an opportunity to sample that, and then I'll see you tomorrow. I'll be right here. God bless you, my friends. Talk to you soon.